Hi, this is Dan. Folks have been bugging me to see some photos from my trip to China last year, so I put together this little slideshow. I hope you enjoy it. After an initial few days in Guangzhou, the first place that Ewan and I traveled together was Hong Kong. Most people think of Hong Kong as merely an island, but actually the Hong Kong territory is made up of numerous islands and a large amount of land that is actually located on the mainland of China. In this photo, we're standing in Kowloon, which is part of the mainland portion of Hong Kong. In the background, you see the high-rise office towers and apartments of Hong Kong Island. The place where we're standing for this photo is the Hong Kong Cinema's Walk of Stars, which is roughly analogous to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Anyone who knows me knows that Jackie Chan is one of my favorite action stars, so of course I couldn't resist trying on his handprints for size. And this is my favorite photograph of that visit to Hong Kong, as Ewan gazes off into the setting sun. That evening, we took an incredible, nearly vertical tramway ride to the top of Victoria Peak, where we enjoyed an excellent dinner. After dinner, we strolled around and enjoyed these incredible views overlooking the city and the harbor below. After Hong Kong, we returned to Guangzhou for a few more days. This next series of photos gives you some idea of what the city is like. Motorbikes are nearly ubiquitous in China, especially in the big cities. They're used for everything from personal transportation, as taxis, and even as delivery goods wagons. Here we see a gentleman with a bike that looks just a little bit overloaded. Guangzhou is a bustling city of nearly 8 million people. The traffic there is just horrendous. This photo doesn't do it justice. The roads are filled with everything from bicycles and motorbikes to these funky tractor-like vehicles that have a top speed of about 15 or 20 miles per hour. And don't forget the odd handcart also. Of course, in China, navigation is best left to someone who can read the language. Even the locals, however, have trouble with some of the signs. There's so much information on some of them, I've actually seen people stop their vehicle in the middle of the road so they have time to read the directions. A typical hazy afternoon in Guangzhou makes it difficult to see the top of the CITIC Plaza building. This is the tallest building in Guangzhou and is about 50 feet taller than the Empire State Building in New York. Also common on the skyline of Guangzhou and every other city in China are construction cranes. As most of us know, the economy in China is booming, and it seems the entire country is under construction. Anyone who thinks that China might be a backwater will be surprised to see these modern gas station convenience stores. This could be on any corner in America. And you know you're in a developed country when Century 21 has offices in every city. Starbucks managed to have quite a few outlets in Guangzhou. Near every bus stop in Guangzhou and every other city in China, you'll see groups of motorbike riders. Most people in the cities take the buses to get to their destination. If the bus doesn't bring them close enough, they'll hire these riders to take them the rest of the way. It's not quite legal, but certainly tolerated. One learns quickly that the traffic in China's cities is quite chaotic. Here's a typical scene. Motorbike cutting across traffic, deliveryman carrying a large box across the middle of the road, people trying to turn left and right, and bumper-to-bumper traffic. It's quite chaotic. It seems at most times that the traffic laws in China are merely guidelines. Our first trip to the interior of China was to Lijiang. This 800-year-old city is in southwestern Guangxi province near the border of Myanmar, better known to us as Burma. The skyline of Lijiang is dominated by nearby Jade Dragon Snow Mountain. This mountain is over 5,535 meters tall. That's more than 18,000 feet. No matter where one travels in the city, the mountain is always present. Here's a view of the downtown area in the new part of the city. At times, the views were quite reminiscent of my many visits to Switzerland. One afternoon, we rented this small motorbike from a man off the street for the equivalent of about $10, no questions asked. Here we are in the main plaza in town, having a photo with the chairman. The reason people come to Lijiang is to experience the ancient center of the city. There we have buildings that are hundreds of years old and virtually untouched since the day they were built. Lijiang is not only popular for its architecture and its history, but also well known for the web of canals that channel fresh water throughout the old town. And the water from those canals is put to use by the residents. Here we see a clever compartmentalized channeling system. Part of it is used to wash clothes. The other part, where the water is clean, is used to wash food. Construction in the historic center of Lijiang is still done as it has been for hundreds of years. Manual labor is the main ingredient. On the day we arrived in the old town, this construction site was vacant. This hand-hewn, timber-frame structure went from nothing to this state in only 2.5 days. China is incredibly diverse. It seems the 19th century and the 21st century coexist side by side. One afternoon we went into a cafe for lunch. Inside we saw this gentleman with his hunting falcon. Standing right behind him, unfortunately cropped out of the photo, was a young teenage girl chatting on the internet with her friends. And just to prove that I actually can use a pair of chopsticks, here I am enjoying lunch. Try to ignore the slop on my chin. Here's a view of Sifeng Square. This is the largest square in the center of Old Town Lijiang. The Naxi people are the indigenous ethnic group in this part of China. Here are some Naxi ladies in their traditional garb. On this square, the locals staged regular dancing exhibitions for the tourists and of course managed to get them involved also. A few moments later, these gentlemen wandered into the square. I'm not certain if they were reenactors or if this is their everyday dress, but it was certainly an interesting sight. As the sun sets, the beauty of Lijiang becomes apparent. The local shops and inns all begin to illuminate their red lanterns. Once darkness takes over, the effect is really quite amazing. Of course, to my eye, the lanterns weren't the only beauty in Lijiang. That evening, we decided to eat in this incredible little pub. I didn't know it at the time, but I discovered later this pub is actually partially owned by a classmate of Ewan's from Beijing University. As we were eating, I caught some movement out of the corner of my eye from underneath the stairs. Remember that falcon we saw earlier at the cafe? Turns out that same falcon lives underneath the stairs in this pub. A few minutes later, the owner brought along a second falcon to keep him company for the night. Equally as interesting as the falcon is the pig you see hanging in the left-hand side of this photograph. When we first came in, we just assumed it was a prop. After we realized that it was a real pig, we asked the manager about it. As the story goes, the entrails are removed, the fluids are drained, and the pig is allowed to hang for approximately 5 years. At that point, it's sufficiently dried, they cut it into strips and eat it. Believe it or not. Old Town Lijiang is not the only thing worth seeing in the area. One day, we hired a van and a driver and spent the entire day driving around the countryside looking at different attractions. The geographic similarity of the area to Colorado is quite striking. If it weren't for the architecture of the buildings in this photo, you might think you were in the Rockies. We hiked through one ancient village to have a look at some of the buildings. Here's a view that we Westerners would probably consider quintessential China. In the village, we came across this traditional timber frame and stone structure under construction. Our guide told us from his experience it would probably take about another 2 or 2.5 weeks for them to complete it. Here's a local that I attempted to surreptitiously photograph. If you've been looking closely at these photographs, you may notice something missing. Even though we're in a small rural village in what we would consider to be a third world country, one can't help but notice how clean and tidy everything is. The locals certainly take pride in their homes. Our next stop was a large monastery maintained by the Dongba religion. The gate to the grounds was guarded by these large statues. On the left we have the Mother, and on the right we have the Father of the world. Approaching the entrance to the main temple, we're greeted by this rather large fertility symbol. The temple holds a commanding view of the valley below. Nearby to the temple, and the reason for the temple's existence, is this view. What we have here is a spring which comes out of the earth right at the base of this large tree in the center of the photo. The religion believes that this is the mother tree of the earth. A few meters away, the stream drains into this beautiful reflecting pond. The pond is stocked with an amazing number of these golden salmon. Afterward, we visited an agricultural settlement. This settlement appeared to be some sort of reenactment village. It was filled with period pieces and folks in costumes that were certainly not contemporary. These two colorful characters were happy to have us come in and take a look around. And of course, pose for the obligatory tourist shots. Our next stop that afternoon was at the locally famous Yufeng Monastery. The monastery gets its notoriety from this tree. This is actually two trees that were grafted together more than 1,000 years ago. The guide told us that each spring when it blossoms with the flowers of both species of tree. Our next mild adventure was a horseback ride into the local foothills. Our ride began on the shores of a large shallow lake. We followed the winding forest trails up into the hills. We followed the trails for about 10 kilometers, and then we stopped beside this quiet alpine meadow. After a rest and then a short hike, we mounted up and headed back down toward the lake. Again, the terrain was quite reminiscent of Colorado. Once back at the lake, we left our horses behind and completed the journey in this pole boat. The lake was quite large but very shallow, less than 2 feet deep in most places. A large portion of the lake was divided up into small pens where the local fishermen would raise their stocks of fish. The lake also had quite a lot of waterfowl. Our guide seemed to think that a stationary bird was not a good bird, so he spent quite some time trying to sneak up on them and make them fly. We spent the rest of our time in Lijiang taking in some traditional music, just enjoying the scenery, and wandering the labyrinthine, narrow streets of the old portion of town. The ornate, elaborate architecture, the narrow, climbing streets, and the exotic nature of the locale all combined to make for a wonderful travel experience. After leaving Lijiang, a short flight brought us to Kunming. There we visited the Kunming International Exposition Park. The park, which was opened in 1999, features pavilions showcasing the culture and products of countries throughout Asia. Kunming is known in China as the City of Flowers. This became self-evident as we wandered through the grounds. In the China Pavilion, we see a replica of the flagship of Admiral Zheng He. The admiral sailed his fleet from China all the way around the world in 1421. This was a good 70 years before Columbus found America. Sometimes the English translation of Chinese phrases is humorously literal. The grounds of the exhibition also feature distinct areas which recreate the geography and flora of many of China's provinces. Here we see the grounds of the Pavilion of Thailand. We came across this group of young Chinese soldiers in front of the Pakistan Pavilion. Having been to Vietnam in the year 2000, I thought a quick look into the Vietnam Pavilion would be interesting. This may be ancient traditional dress for Vietnam, but when I was there, I didn't see anything like it. Again, the tricky translation of Chinese to English gives us this phrase, unrecycle? Our short visit to Kunming came to an end as the sun began to set, and we departed to these beautiful views. After Kunming, we returned to Guangzhou, where we spent the last 2 days relaxing. I also discovered that one has not truly experienced Asia unless you've spent an evening in a karaoke lounge. Here are Jing and Shuren, close friends of Yuan. Jing is a classmate of Yuan's from Beijing University. Jing and Shuren previously lived in the United States for 12 years, where both of their children were born. Jing picked up her MBA at New York University. Shuren was working on his doctorate in finance when they decided to return to China to take advantage of the booming economy and the myriad business opportunities. Shuren turned out to be quite a good singer also. Two more close friends are Lizi and Zhongming. Lizi is an ear, nose, and throat physician at Guangzhou's teaching hospital and is Zhongming's wife. Zhongming also happens to be Yuan's boss. For me, the highlight of the evening was hearing Yuan sing. She's a trained singer and has an incredible voice. I managed to sneak through the evening with only singing one song. If you expect to see photos of that, don't hold your breath. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my trip to China as much as I did. I was lucky enough to visit for a second time in January and February of 2006, and I'll be returning for my third trip in June of 2006. So, stay tuned for the sequel. Till then, bye-bye.